Okay, hi everybody. Welcome. Great to have you all here this evening. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Community Task Force for the City of Dublin for Tuesday, November 17th, 2020. With that, I want to go straight to roll call. Jenny, if you would go ahead and do that, and then I have an introduction that we'll have. If there are any new folks joining, we'll do introductions. So, Jenny, if you'll do roll call, that'd be appreciated.
Certainly. Mr. Amponsa?
Here.
Ms. Bannister?
Here.
Dr. Hoadley?
Here.
Ms. Merrier?
Here.
Mr. Robinson? I believe I see him. Okay. Mr. Shoji?
Here.
Ms. Sofora?
Here.
Mr. Wang?
Here.
Mr. White?
Present.
Mr. Napke?
Here.
And Ms. Papana?
Here.
Great, thank you, everyone. And we may have more members join us as the evening goes on, and if they join in, we'll try to recognize them coming on the meeting. I did have a couple folks email me that I noticed here late this afternoon, and I didn't catch up on all my emails as we were coming in, but I saw a couple folks say that they couldn't join us this evening, and as we've said, that's okay. We appreciate it when you can be a part of this. So I want to introduce Sammy Papana. This is her first meeting, and Sammy is my youth appointee representing Jerome High School. Sammy, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Sammy. I'm a senior at Dublin Jerome, and I'm excited to be here.
It doesn't get any better than that. So appreciate that you joined us this evening and that you were interested to be a part of this. Lindsay, did I introduce you last time? I can't remember if I did or not.
I don't think so, Dana. Hi.
Okay, this is Lindsay Weisenhower. Lindsay is on our communications staff with the City of Dublin and is supporting the task force, and appreciate Lindsay's time. And I think you know Deviani and JM, the other staff that are on here with us, everyone. I see the chief has joined us this evening as well, Chief Pice. So with that, we do have an agenda before us. We did provide the minutes to the last meeting. I hope you all had a chance to look at those. If there are any questions or comments, I see Lynette just joined us. Jenny, if you want to note. Hi, Lynette. How are you? Thanks for joining in.
Good to be here.
Great. Okay, good. Your audio is working. That's great. So anyway, you did receive the minutes, so hopefully you had a chance to review those. If there are any questions or comments about the minutes, certainly entertain those. Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes unless there are any changes or comments. Okay, hearing no changes or comments, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Dan, I'll move the minutes first.
Okay, who was that? Was that Esau? Who was that? I didn't catch it, sorry.
Todd Hoadley, Dana.
Oh, Todd, I'm sorry, Todd. Is there, I should know that voice, it didn't pop out. Is there a second?
I will second that, Dana, and this is Esau.
Okay, thanks, Esau. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Great. Any opposed, same sign? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Thank you for that. I'm going to move right on. I'm just going to highlight the agenda tonight. We do need to appoint a chair and vice chair. I told you all that's been coming, so hopefully someone has an interest in those roles. Pretty long agenda. We'll try to move through this in an expeditious but thorough way. We're going to talk about the topics of the focus from the previous meeting, a meeting, how to meet outside of the task force meetings. I might ask the chair, whoever that is, who will take over the agenda, by the way, to perhaps move up updates. I think Dr. Hoadley has another meeting to be at 7. I want to make sure he has a chance to speak to you all, and if you all have any questions or comments of Dr. Hoadley. And then depending on timing, we can get an update from JM and the ESAL and or the chief and the Chiefs Advisory Committee, any other new business. And then I wanted to talk about next steps, upcoming meetings, and then have a little discussion about our 2021 meeting. So I think we'll spend the bulk of our time in reviewing those topics that I gave you in the memo that I sent out. So with that, I want to just open up the floor for discussion regarding the chair and vice chair. I did share with you resolution 4120 that did explain the responsibilities of the chair and the vice chair. So with that, why don't we open it up for discussion regarding the position of chair of the community task force. I guess I would ask, is anyone interested in that role? And don't everyone jump at once.
Dana, let me, if I could ask this question with respect to the chair position. So the as I understand it, the role would encompass sort of managing, overseeing these events. Meetings, and kind of overseeing the development of our deliverables as it relates to this group. And then the vice chair. Is that a role that primarily, and I apologize, it's been a while since I've taken a look at the documents, but the vice chair would step in the event that the chair would not have the ability to fulfill those roles, if they could not make a meeting or something along those lines. Is that correct?
That's correct, Steve, and it's pretty spot on with traditional role. And I don't want anyone to be scared by that role of chair or vice chair. I will work with you, whoever those people are, very closely in the preparation of meetings. You know, staff's job is to be supportive. It's not asking you to really, take on a whole lot of extra work. Just providing leadership and oversight of the meetings, helping to formulate the agenda. Then oversee the meetings, and yes, the vice chair's role is to step in the absence of the chair. But of course, we would want to include the vice chair in that development so that they're prepared should that person need to step in for the role of chair.
This is Bridget Merrier. I was thinking maybe somebody would have volunteered, or a handful of folks might have expressed interest. I am certainly willing to help out in any way that's helpful. I'm a little hesitant just because this is the first task force I've been on, and my experience in Dublin is based on being a Caucasian straight white woman. So I just put that out there, and but I do want to be helpful. Even if I wasn't chair or vice chair, I would certainly look forward to working with folks on several different topics and promoting whatever the task force wants to do.
So thank you, Bridget. Appreciate that.
Dana, sorry, another point of clarification. Apologies for this. The meeting schedule. I know we talked a little bit about this at the last meeting. I think there was some back and forth as it relates to, we should be meeting. I think at one point we talked quarterly. Another point we monthly, and a lot of that's driven by when we have to get the work. But did we come up with a decision point on that so when we were going to be meeting?
Right, good question. So when I had asked you that in your earlier meetings, the sense of the task force members was that monthly would be appropriate. I sensed at our second meeting that there might be, as we would hope there would be, some sense of urgency around some of the topics. But then again, that could be in the form of additional, more routine meetings, or it could be activities outside of the meetings, depending on how your agenda flows and how you want to affect things and engagement and so forth. So, that could take place in other ways, if you will. But generally, what I heard, and I think I had Candy actually go back out and try to poll everyone again since your last meeting to see if there was any desire to do meetings more often. I think that came back, or there was not much of a response on that. So I don't know if that's saying anything other than monthly is what was originally proposed. Again, I thought there might be a sense to want to meet more often, but that's really this task force's call, however often you want to meet. I don't recall the quarterly meeting, but that could maybe be something down the road once you get an agenda going and things addressed. So, and again, it's totally flexible as to what the task force wants to do. And as I said before, we'll meet every week if that's what you all want to do. So, but I know you have busier schedules, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Can I ask another clarifying question around staff support? You mentioned a number of team members with the city that would be helpful with us. I know there's several on the call here or meeting here today. Can you talk a little bit more about the role of the staff and team, the Dublin team, to support the task force and its duties and work that it has to get done? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. We assign staff to every board, commission, and committee that and advisory committee, task force, or what have you, that the city has. Staff takes up a role in assisting those members. We're fortunate that we have, this is not a high-paying job on your part. This is volunteerism, and we're here and we do get paid to be here to support you. So that's what we're here to do, and so that's why I have the great staff that I have involved here. I'll bring in more others if needed. If there's other things we're doing, that I even have consultant services, and we have the resources to support this task force at whatever level is necessary to get the job done. You all are providing us the strategic direction you want to go. We appreciate that you'll roll up your sleeves to whatever extent that might be to jump in and be engaged. It's helpful because, this is to be your agenda and your initiative and the things that you want to explore, but we're here to support you in whatever that is. So the chair and vice chair is not going to be sitting around writing reports and doing things like that. We'll handle all that kind of stuff for you. So there's really not that kind of work involved for, especially for the leadership and really for any of you when it comes down to that, unless it's something that you want to take on and do as a member of the task force.
Yeah, I'd like to volunteer as chair if it's all right with everybody.
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
I'd like to volunteer as chair if it's all right with everybody.
Thank you, Kofi. I support that.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, or anyone else? Okay. Well, I guess if there's no one else that would like to do that, thank you, Kofi, very much for volunteering to do that. Appreciate the leadership. If anyone would like to, I'd like to have a nomination and then a second, if you're so willing.
I'll nominate Kofi for chair of the task force.
I'll send that.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. All right, Mr. Chair, congratulations, and thank you for volunteering to do that. That's terrific. And I can hand the gavel. I wish I had one. I don't have one. But I can hand the gavel to you, and you can lead the rest of this if you'd like to seek nominations for vice chair.
Sure. Is there anyone willing to volunteer for the vice chair position?
As I mentioned before, I'm willing to help out in any way that's necessary. So if no one else wants to be vice chair, I'd certainly love to do that, but I would defer in case somebody else wants to help out in that capacity.
Bridget, I think that's a lovely idea.
I also think that as well.
I think so too, Bridget. And I was just going to add, when you said Caucasian white woman, I think we need all perspectives. And so definitely need that voice there also. So yes, I second that or support that.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Bridget, for volunteering to be vice chair. We'll fully support you and Kofi.
So Bridget, you're nominating for vice chair?
I'm offering, can I nominate myself or move to nominate myself? I don't know how that would work.
I move to nominate Bridget as the vice chair.
I second.
All right, so Bridget is the vice chair. Dana, do I have to, is there anything else I have to say about that?
No, I would appreciate, Kofi, if you would ask for a vote, just so we have that on the record.
Is there anyone who disagrees?
So how about all those in favor say aye? We'll do that to Robert's rule.
Yeah. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
And then
Any disagreeers say no.
there you go.
All right, Bridget is the vice chair.
Okay.
Love it.
And
Congratulations.
Dana, I actually do not have the agenda pulled up, so I do not know what needs to be moved up at the moment.
Okay, well, what I would recommend then, Mr. Chair, is we, if everyone's okay with this, that we would ask, because Dr. Hoadley's got to go on to a 7 o'clock. And if you don't mind, Dr. Hoadley, and if that's okay with everyone, we would have Dr. Hoadley go ahead and give us an update if he doesn't mind.
Sure, Dana, I'm happy to. Can you guys hear me okay? Great.
Yes.
Good to see everybody here tonight, especially those of our students here. I know you guys are working really hard. So a lot of great things happening in Dublin schools around this very important topic, and feel great to be able to say that 2 weeks ago on Election Day, we dedicated our entire staff training day to the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We brought in Dr. Goldie Muhammad, who's on the faculty at Georgia State University. She gave a keynote address to all of our employees, and we have just over 2,000 employees in Dublin City Schools. So she came in by Zoom. We had to do a lot of logistical operations to accommodate for a limited number of seats on Zoom, but just the feedback from our staff was outstanding. She really talked about and made it so important about how lesson planning can be very thoughtful by our educators so that we are inclusive in all of our classrooms and in all of our lessons. We want to be able to talk about important topics, and we want to do those, make sure that, again, they're thoughtful, they're prearranged, and her presentation was just spectacular. The rest of the day, we broke down into small groups. Some of our teachers worked through modules through Ohio State at the Kirwan Institute. Others had group discussions in their building. And again, just the feedback on that day was a lot of great presentation, a lot of great discussion. And really, I feel we grew as an organization just by having those important conversations. We continue to have our diversity task force in operation. We have an internal school district diversity task force of around a dozen people. That's our core group. But then we also have a group of over 60 that represents representatives from all 24 of our school buildings. So they're actually meeting tomorrow night. The large group is. We have a member of our Board of Education, Mr. Stu Harris, that sits on that as well. And so they've had great conversations. They were really the group that identified Dr. Muhammad as our guest speaker for Election Day. Social studies, again, it's our time for updating social studies curriculum in Dublin City Schools. We go on a 5-year rotation for all of our curriculum areas. We've really been involving a lot of our parents in this discussion. That's really forward progress for us. A lot of times it's educators almost exclusively having those discussions. We wanted to bring the voice of an ever-growing diverse community into this very important topic around the curriculum selected for our students in Dublin City Schools around social studies. So that group continues. They actually had a meeting last evening, and that work is being led by our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Mrs. Jill Reinhardt. Staying on the training standpoint, because it's been a year of great conversations and training, we are again working with Steve Francis, who is a Dublin resident. Back in August and September, Mr. Francis did racial diversity and implicit bias training for all of our administrators at the central office level. He's going to repeat that training in January and in February for all of our administrators at the building level, and that will include members of our Board of Education. That's about a 4-hour training, and if you know Mr. Francis, he's got a really history of this type of work and is just excellent at leading discussions and help people moving toward really a higher level of understanding, especially as it relates to implicit bias. And then the final thing I wanted to share tonight, and this is exciting for us, but you'll hear me speak at our school board meeting on Monday about moving forward with the hiring of a coordinator of diversity, equity, and inclusion for Dublin City Schools. We've been working on this discussion since the summertime. You know, we've had diversity, equity, and inclusion officers in the past, and it's tough in a big district to have one person in charge of anything. We have over 2,000 employees, 16,000 students. It's a community that's 70 different languages. So having one person lead that work has been a heavy lift in the past. So we've been working on how we can spread that out, but still having a point person. So on Monday, you're going to hear me present some of our research findings to our Board of Education, talk about some sample job descriptions. Timing going forward, we anticipate on December 14th, we'll be asking our board to officially approve the job description so that when we come back to school in January of 21, we can post that position and then move forward with our hiring process. So very excited to have another member of the team. Our board has been very supportive and frankly encouraging in that movement there. And for them to dedicate additional financial resources when at the same time we're being cut in our funding from the state level really, I think, shows their commitment to this very important conversation. So again, job description approval December 14th with the hiring process kicking off in January of 2021. So a lot of great things going on, a lot of important conversations, all in the midst of a global pandemic. And so, again, I want to thank our students, especially those who are on the call tonight, just for hanging with us. I know this has been a different school year. I know, Jamil, you said you got a college visit tonight. College visits look completely different. So again, just thanks for your leadership and especially for our students. And I want to include Will for your leadership over in Hilliard Schools as well. So any questions that I might be able to answer for you about our work inside of Dublin City Schools on any of those topics or anything related to this topic?
I actually had a question. I was wondering are you able to share any aspect of the job description with us before you present it to the council?
Yeah, we have some draft job descriptions right now, Kofi. I don't have access to them. Those are developed in our HR department. I can share the process, though. We've reached out to a lot of Central Ohio school districts. We've obtained the job description from Hilliard City Schools, Olentangy City Schools. I believe it was Worthington or Westerville, and our HR team is putting those together. We really want to see a person come in and be able to lead curriculum, because again, our core business is teaching and learning. And when you go back to the Dear Dublin Instagram page, that was an igniter for us locally in this conversation. You know, a lot of that was around whether it be implicit bias or lack of sensitivity or understanding of some of the cultural differences among, again, our many different populations within Dublin here. So we're going to be looking for a person that can span across, again, the different diverse populations, but also to help bring lessons into classrooms, because that's where we can honestly affect our 16,000 plus students. So it's going to be somebody with really an educational background that can help us in lesson planning. That's kind of a 10,000 foot. Once we have this in our next meeting, I can definitely share this out, or I could send it out to the group after next Tuesday when we have kind of a first reading on that job description. Happy to share. And those are all public documents, so there's nothing that we wouldn't share with anybody in our community on that job description. Is there any thoughts on the group as far as components of the job description that you would like to see that we may take into consideration, especially from your leadership in our community or from our students by being a part of Dublin City Schools?
Dr. Hoadley, this is J.M. Rayburn with the City of Dublin.
Yeah.
I serve as the LGBTQ liaison for the city, and I've had a few calls recently that speak to that issue. So I think that's very important to some residents, and I would ask that be definitely part of this consideration.
Sure, absolutely.
I was just wondering, I know this person will be in charge of the learning, have some type of input on the learning curriculum, but what type of social role will they play within the district? For example, will they help create diversity and inclusion trainings? Will they oversee any racial complaints or any type of discriminatory complaints? Will they play any role socially within the city?
Let me not talk about the city, Kofi, but really in our school district. So I think that's what you meant anyway, is that. So absolutely, we see, again, with one person and 24 buildings, it has to be a person that is building capacity. So when you talked about trainings and leading those trainings or arranging for those trainings, absolutely this person would play a very key role in that. That's how we would build capacity across all of our district here. Again, with 2,000 employees, we just have to focus on that important thing. So as far as hearing complaints, I would say it's going to depend upon that. We get into some privacy laws. We also get into, is it a complaint that's coming about an employee? Is it student to student issues and things like that? So I wouldn't want to make a blanket statement that this person would hear all complaints, but there would certainly be some complaints that they may be involved in that process there. And then also just for helping, making sure that, again, our curriculum and the lessons that we're having, and this would fall under training, are really choose the proper, they're very understanding of our many different racial subgroups, ethnic subgroups, the religions in our district. We're a very, very diverse school system. And so helping us just be more aware of the global diversity that exists in Dublin schools on a daily basis, this person would really be the champion for that.
And my last question would be, from the moment the person applies for the job, what would the interview process look for this person?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Kofi. I mean, typically we do an online interview process. We have, as an equal opportunity employer, we want to make sure that all applicants have due consideration. So we take all of our applicants online where a person does not, there's no requirement that they share whether or not they're a minority. There's no requirement that they even share gender because we try to put up, if you will, firewalls around that. We'll ultimately create a hiring process. We're really a believer that we collectively are better than me, an individual in the hiring process. So you'll see multiple steps in here. If it's similar to a principal position, and this is a little bit premature, but anytime we hire a principal, we're always bringing in a selection of our parents into that so that there's a parent community voice in this. So I envision it very similar to a principal role where we have administrators, where we have employees, usually heavily on our teacher side, where we have administrators. They all go through a process, and then they elevate their top candidates up to a group of central office administrators. And it may even include members of our Board of Education at that final step in the process there. What other questions about this important topic might you have? This may be also one that we involve some of our students in the process. We've done that in the past for high school administrators in some of our buildings. So we could reach out to our students, especially our high school leadership, to be part of that interview process as well.
Totally. This is Nancy. And I know in the last meeting you had said the challenges was for that kind of position was because of the diverse group, the diverse population and the numbers. So what is, again, maybe you said it and I missed it. What is going to be different about this position that kind of tackles that challenge so that we're not setting up the candidate for failure again?
Yeah, Nancy, that's something we've been talking a lot about because it is difficult. I mean, it's one that we are very diverse. We have 70 different spoken languages, and so whenever you have one person that becomes really your point person, it's important that you grow capacity around that. One of the things that we've been discussing is trying to create a layer under this, if you will, through the creation of maybe supplemental contracts or stipends to have more representation, whether it be members of our faculty and staff or members of our community, because it's an extremely heavy lift for one person to be the point person around this really, really major big issue. And again, sometimes the best predictor of the future is the past. And in the past, we've really struggled. We've had, I think, 3 or 4 diversity coordinators in the past, and varying levels of results. Largely, when you do an autopsy on what went wrong, we just didn't have enough capacity for a fast-growing school district. So, Nancy, that's going to be really important that it's not just one person, but that we develop a whole group around them to support their work in the district. Any other questions?
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think, Nancy, you're up. Go ahead.
My question has to do with the training, diversity training. So one of the things that we had mentioned as a group is we would like to be able to, be able to see what the goal is and be able to measure it. And so what can the district tell us that you have set as the measures for us to know that these trainings are indeed working and that we are moving in the right direction as a district?
Yeah, Nancy, that's a great question. And, I'll be very candid. We haven't set metrics on trying to move the needles. We have not done any pre and post test measurements there. We're largely just bringing experiences to people right now. But with a new person coming in and leading this, doing a pre and a post measurement would be something that we'd be looking to do. Because right now we're more bringing experiences to our staff as opposed to measuring the outcomes.
Can I ask a question about the DEI coordinator position? I'm thinking to myself, if that person already, this is Bridget talking.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to see the squares you're talking to me.
If that person was already in place, I feel like they would be a very good resource for the task force. just in my mind, I'm imagining that person would have, you know, a sense of, or in a good perspective on what some of the challenges are in the schools and what the city might do to help, and or the task force, you know, what we might pick to focus on. All of this work is obviously not going to end in a year, even if the task force does. So I'm wondering if there is any anticipation for how that coordinator in his or her experience might inform the broader community in regards to getting our goals met here, as we've come together to try to do.
Yeah, that's a great question, and Bridget, I'm gonna have to reflect upon that because again, it's going to be a mountain of work just because of the size of our school district for one person to try to handle this work and lead this work internally. And so having a community fixture or a community impact, while we hope that that's the case, I think it's going to take a lot more than one person. It's a 50,000 person community, and it's going to take a lot more than just one person coming in for us inside our school to probably move the needle. I hate to say candidly, one iota in our community as a whole. They can certainly be part and maybe even lead some conversations, but I think that's on really all of us to be part of that as well.
Yeah, I'd like to lean on that as well. I really think that the good role of this task force is going to be, and it is the challenge of the task force to try to set that, what that business could look like going forward. And frankly, that could be, I would never want any of you to get hung up on this task force only lasts for a year and then it goes away. It really could be that this task force, or a task force like it, standing advisory committee to council and the community, could be that body that is actually serves that role for the community going forward as well. So it's not one person, one voice, one point of perspective, but it's a broad perspective like we have here. So something to think about as you think through your recommendations going forward.
One last comment I would like to just toss out there is when this, I know it's in the early stages of getting the job description down, but when the position is concrete, I would just like you to keep in mind that hopefully this position can set long-term goals for the school district and not just, a one-year goal. And also that this, that's just really it. Hoping to see more long-term goals set in place and not just momentarily goals that last a couple months.
Any other questions or thoughts you guys have for me tonight? I can hang on to about 7, and then we have a doctor's COVID meeting that I'm going to have to shift over to.
Okay, well, Todd, we really appreciate that. I'm going to help our chairman out since I don't know if Kofi, you say you don't have the agenda in front of you, so I'll try to move us to the next topic, and then you can take it from there. So we'll come back to updates, I think, if that's okay. I really was hoping, and I hope everyone agrees that, we really want to try to pick up where we left off. I hope you forgive me for my trying to summarize the focuses that I thought I was hearing at your last meeting, and so I will apologize if I didn't get those quite right. I just wanted
Dana,
to get those.
Before you go into that, I apologize for interrupting. Can I, if it's okay with you and Mr. Chairperson, give a quick update on the Chiefs Advisory Council, because there's a lot of education component to that conversation so far that I thought might make sense for Dr. Hoadley to hear it. So Chief, obviously, good to see you. Join in if you see that I've missed some of the big items, but we have now had 3 meetings just like this committee or task force has as well. Started out with the introduction to not only just the members of the committee, but also to the Dublin Police Department as a whole. And Chief brought to the meeting and to the subsequent meetings lieutenants that lead divisions within the department, as well as the director of the communications center that Dublin runs, not just for Dublin, but also for the surrounding communities. So we have had a chance to learn the structure of the police department, as well as some of the goals that Chief had set for 2020 and the process of how they go through that each and every year that is consistent with the mission of the department. And then we had a second meeting, spent a good amount of time on the whole conversation about the plot to kidnap the Michigan governor, because unfortunately the city of Dublin was in that conversation, so there was a lot of interest as far as that goes. Ultimately, I think what came out of that was the true interest in how the department as a whole is communicating to the community. And I have a feeling that that becomes an overarching theme of the work of the Chiefs Advisory Committee. Because another topic that we tackled right after that was a website feedback, because there is a website update coming to the police department. And certainly, that there were no shortage of opinions, I think, Chief, that would be safe to say. Everybody had some great feedback. It could be a pretty active group. But at the end of the day, everybody wants the police department to be able to effectively communicate to the community who they are, what they do. And we want the community to also be able to communicate with the police department, because there is more than just one group that represents the city of Dublin. In fact, there's, as Dr. Hobley was saying about the school district, such a diversity in the city as well. And for each community or each group within the community to be able to communicate with the police department effectively and be comfortable doing so takes a lot of work. And I think we're starting to realize that. And then the conversation went under that umbrella to schools. We did talk about community education, so a community education unit, but more directly about the school resource officers. Because I think just like the conversation comes up in this group, in that group as well, people see education and what the kids experience every day as the key to some of the challenges that we have ahead of us. So among many topics that were discussed as potentials for us to tackle at some point, we decided as a group that the school resource officer and their roles within the schools would be the main topic, if not the only topic for our next conversation. So I believe, Chief, you were going to have some, or at least one, if not multiple, school resource officers in our next meeting, so that we can hear from them what they go through, what they experience in the school, as well as for us to share some of our thoughts as a committee. I also think that in addition to the education being a common topic of interest, there's maybe a common challenge or a common opportunity, perhaps, in gathering information. I think this group talked about importance of data. That came up in the conversation about the EI training as well, but that other group is also talking about the need for data, so that we know what it is that we need to talk about, so that we can measure the progress that we're making. And I think to get the data that we're talking about, perhaps it's going to take some kind of a survey, perhaps it's going to take some kind of a coordinated effort that reaches into different parts of the community. And as long as there is a need on the Chiefs Advisory Council and the task force that can be shared, I do think that that can be a coordinated effort. Those would be my takeaway at the moment. Any questions I can answer for anybody?
What exactly is your goal with talking with the school resource officers? What are you hoping to get from them and figure out from them?
Like I said, I think there is a general sense that what the children, the young people of our community go through day in and day out, and how they perceive the police department is critical, not just today, but for the long haul. And the conversation went straight to the school resource officers because they are in school every day. And they would be the police officers for many kids if they started talking about the police department. So we wanted to, I think, truly understand who they are, what they do. So we've talked about the trainings that they go through, and there were some suggestions as to how the training perhaps can be improved. Suggestion of adding trauma. Trauma, what was the term?
Trauma-informed care.
Trauma-informed care, thank you. Yes, that was exactly it. So yeah, there's just, I think, shared belief on the importance of education. Just so happens that when you're talking about the police department, the school resource officers would be the face of the department to the children. I think that's why that's become such a huge topic at the moment. If there's no question, I think I'm done.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would recommend while updates, and if there's no other questions, we go ahead and ask JM if he has any updates or comments while we're under updates, and then we can move on to the discussion.
That sounds good with me. JM, do you have any updates?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, everyone on the task force. I do have 2 items for discussion to share with you, and these are brought on by conversations I've had with residents in the community who have reached out to me as my role as LGBTQ liaison for the city. And for your knowledge, my role, along with Officer McCloskey, we serve as LGBTQ plus liaisons to the city, and we are more of a conduit from the community to our chief and to our city manager. So that's my role in all of this. That being said, there were 2 items that I want to bring to your attention. The first one is there's a lot of, I'm trying to find the right words, frustration. There's a lot of discouraging feelings around what's happening in the school district. I think there's a lot of tough conversations happening that need to be had, and that's okay, that's expected. There's a lot of, I guess where people are getting caught up is around the term love is love. And I don't have much to say about any details, but I just wanted to remind the group of where that term originates from and why it's important. It goes back mainly to Lin-Manuel Miranda winning his Tony in 2016. And that was an award show that took place on June 12th of 2016. And he said that as a way to support marriage equality, which happened in 2015 prior to that. But also, if you remember from history, a couple hours before the Tonys, there was a mass shooting in Orlando, Florida at the Pulse nightclub where 49 people were killed and 53 people were wounded. And this was an LGBTQ-oriented nightclub. So that phrase does invoke support for marriage equality, but it's also meant to be as a phrase of solidarity with the LGBT community after that event. So that's all I want to say on that matter, and I hope it's for the good of the order. That's what everyone will now think of when they think of that phrase. The other item that came up was, what are the protections that the city has in place for the LGBTQ community? And more specifically, what's an ordinance that speaks to non-discrimination? There are 32 cities in the state of Ohio that have non-discrimination ordinance on the books. And that ranges from Akron to Coshocton to Portsmouth, all the big cities, and then sprinkling of suburbs in the middle. In Central Ohio, there are 6 communities that have non-discrimination ordinances. Those are Bexley, Columbus, Newark, Reynoldsburg, Westerville, and Worthington. So the point is, there are residents in the community that like to see Dublin join that group of cities. And it's something that should be discussed upon. At least that was the concern of the residents I spoke to. So I bring that to your attention as something to consider and something for us to consider. It's a big deal to a few people to have those protections on the books. So I just want to bring that to your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I just want to say I wasn't really aware of that, so thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else have any questions for JM? Dana, I'm now looking at the agenda. We've done all the updates. Should we go to new business / discussion?
I would recommend you go back up to number 5 regarding those focus areas from the previous meeting. I started to mention those earlier.
Yeah.
I did my best to try to just summarize those in the memo, but you have the minutes yourself. You can see for yourself what those were. I sort of identified 15 areas that I thought kind of popped out at me as I read through the minutes, but whatever you think those are. The idea here being that I think what I thought the committee, the task force was trying to do at your last meeting was sort of brainstorm and talk about some of those items or ideas, issues that you might start to put together as a framework for discussion or a area of focus. That's how I looked at it, but that doesn't mean that's what you want to do. So I'll leave that up to you all to determine. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you all to determine how you want to, or whether you want to pick up on that conversation.
I actually have a comment about that. Last meeting, Stephen recommended a form of data collection. I forget how he wanted to go about it, but I would like to touch on that again. Is there a way the city can go about maybe sending out a survey or just collecting some data on the thoughts of people who live in Dublin?
If a community survey would be a recommendation of this task force, we could take that up. It's not something I will rush out and do without some vetting out of what that is and how you want to deploy it and what it would be comprised of. So if a survey and as Esau mentioned, if that's the Chiefs Advisory Committee's desire as well to get some baseline info, we could certainly take a look at that and see what a deployment of such a survey might entail.
I'm wondering, there must be some information and statistics that already exist. I'm thinking of the upcoming census data that I don't know when cities actually get access to it and when it's finalized. So there's probably, I imagine the city has statistics about the city and who's living here and working here that we don't have to collect, that could maybe inform some of what we're doing. And then perhaps we could distinguish more of what Stephen or Kofi really wants out of a survey, which I assume would ask some of the questions that don't get answered for governmental reasons, for the census or something else. But I concur it would be helpful to have sort of a baseline of information about the city and residents and probably employees.
We do have some of that information. Yeah, the answer is yes. We can share with you what we have. JM, Deviani, anything you want to comment there regarding the type of being in the planning department, the kind of data that we might have? Obviously, the organizational information that we have, we can share in whatever format that's in. Anything you want to comment on about that?
Definitely, yeah. We do have access to basic demographics data in terms of population, racial percentages of people, gender percentages, ownership, rentership, and some predictions that Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission takes up every year. So we can definitely provide some baseline basic demographic data.
Thank you. That sounds great. I also wanted to toss a question out there to everybody about the last meeting. We talked about subcommittees a lot. Is that still an interest for you guys? Because I know that was a main topic of the last meeting, but does everyone still have strong feelings for that? If so, how would those subcommittees look like? What would be the need for them?
I actually think that subcommittees is still something that we should strongly consider. If people don't think that subcommittees will be beneficial or effective, then I would either recommend us meeting more often, like maybe bi-weekly instead of every month, just so that we can get more things going, especially since we're still pretty early on this task force. But if not, then I think subcommittees would be something that we should strongly consider.
In regards to the subcommittees, and Dana, you can tell me this. So if they were to meet, would we have to let the city know so that the city can publicize it? So we'd have to what would be the procedure for that?
Yeah, Jennifer Radler, you might recall, our city attorney, cautioned us about subcommittees and the conduct of subcommittees because they do have to walk and talk and act like committees, and meaning that they have to be public and so forth. Frankly, my challenge with that is minutes of those have to be kept. We have to set up the streaming for that and so forth. It would be an enormous challenge for us, to be honest with you, to keep up with that. If you got down to just a couple, then maybe we could formalize that. But if there were a lot of them, it would not be very supportable. It's something I would need to go. I'll be real blunt. It's something I got to go negotiate with our clerk and our legal staff with, to make sure that we could handle that in some fashion. If we really got down to 2 or 3 things, we might be able to logistically support that somehow. And I'm glad that Jenny Delgado can't throw anything at me through the computer screen, and she's trying to keep up with all of the minutes taking and everything of all the various task forces and advisory committees, and lives her life every night in the city. But this is obviously a very important task force. We want you to be productive. The one thing that Jennifer said we could do is a more informal engagement, where if you have an interest in a topic, if you had a big list of topics and you had an interest in the topic, you could informally collaborate on those without calling an official subcommittee. It's when we sort of cross over that line and designating official subcommittees, then all this other stuff kicks in. So that's a really fine line and a tough thing to try. If this were the normal environment where everybody could get together and meet, I think it would make it easier logistically to support and accommodate. In this environment, it makes it a little bit tougher. So that is a challenge, but I don't want it to be a showstopper. I don't want it to be an obstacle whatsoever. So we just need to be creative in how we work on that. Again, if it's something where maybe we tackle a couple topics at a time, and there are subcommittees working around that, we might be able to figure out a way to logistically support that. So what I had hoped to do was get to what are those key focus areas that you really want to undertake, and then how do you organize around that so that I can figure out the logistics of how to support those things. So that's kind of why I keep pushing you on these topical issues. So. But I don't want you to give up on that, and I don't want you to be dismayed by that. We'll figure that kind of stuff out. But like I said, there could be some informal interactions with each other that kind of gets us out of the subcommittee requirements.
I was going to propose we have the 15 summaries, the list that we had. If we can spend some time today and pick like 3 of them, and kind of also not assign. Well, I guess maybe it is assign, and see what each person can look at, so that short of having more meetings, we would be able to be even more productive whenever we do meet, because we will have things to report or things to propose, or things that we are wanting to immediately do. So if we could focus on those 15 and select like 3 of them and, you know, kind of distribute and conquer.
And I think there's probably a few in that list of 15 that can be combined, where the 15 can be condensed into a fewer number.
I'm actually a little bit confused. Where is this 15 topics? Is it in the minutes?
That was in the memo that Dana sent along with the minute. So, yeah.
And again, just because I put them in a list of 15 doesn't mean that's how they fall.
Yeah. So maybe instead of treating them as topics, perhaps we look for themes and divide up, you know, groups based on the themes that people are interested in.
I really do like Nancy's idea of looking at the list and just trying to highlight a couple, trying to be sensitive to what Dana's saying about task force or subcommittees. I don't know about everybody else, but I find this very challenging to make the personal connections with each other, you know, which really does impede our ability to feel comfortable with each other and to sort of join on certain topics that are important. And I think whoever is volunteering their time, if you're going to stick with it, you have to be involved in something that's important to you. So ideally, we'd come up with at least 2 or 3 themes that speak to most of us, with perhaps, I don't know who suggested it, maybe another set of 2 or 3 themes, you know, 4 months from now, so that we can keep most of us engaged in doing something that's going to be helpful for the community.
As I look at the list and I see, you know, what you said, that some of them can be combined together as one and look at like 3 themes. And I know that you had talked about even the other task force and what they're looking at. And I'm looking at 5 and 6, education, youth, student voices. I think, what is it, number 11. So 5, 6, and 11. And 15 can go with anything if you're looking at the list. So I think that could be one that we could tackle. And I'm in education, so that could be an area that I can, you know, look into and kind of take that up.
Nancy, would you add 7 to that group? 5, 6, 7, and 15?
And so what I would propose, even as looking at this areas, is I think we had mentioned it the last time, is opening a document with comments, not a meeting, so that it's not going, that way the ideas can still flow. And Dana, I believe I got an email, but I didn't follow through as far as establishing, maybe Devian, I don't know who sent that, I don't remember, but as far as starting up a you know, a living document that can be updated and shared.
That is another approach. We were talking about a team site, so that you could do that through a team site, which is an acceptable method. You know, it could be a combination of these things, and you know, and I agree with Bridget and hear that loud and clear about the desire for everybody want to work together and to try to advance things. And I want to set up a system that's going to enable that to happen and be created in this environment, which makes it tough to do otherwise. So it could very well be a combination of the team site, where Deviani and JM could chime in on that, or and or sort of these couple subcommittees at a time to try to tackle this. So if you could continue to do your sort of combining of things or theming of things, then we can figure out the logistics of that. Deviani, JM, anything you want to add on the team site while we're on that topic?
Yes, definitely. The team site is created just to do that. So we can certainly create a document under resources that we can add to. Anyone on the teams can do that. And if you tag our team as community task force, we all will get notification that somebody has updated that document. So exactly why we created team site.
It may be worth everyone just doing a practice post just to make sure you can access it and can understand the inner workings of how to use Teams. A suggestion.
And
That's a
Bridget, I think you posted something on Teams as a resource, so that was really helpful to look at. So yeah, to James' point, if we just do one practice post, we can move forward with one document on this.
So I'm having trouble accessing Teams because I use it for work and I have it linked to my Outlook. And as much as I've tried to log off of Teams and log back in with my Gmail, I'm sort of having some issues with it. I don't know if anyone else is having challenges or can provide a hack that I could use to sort of bypass it, because I've tried using Chrome and Explorer, and I cannot access the Teams page. So I'm kind of lost when it comes to what's happening.
I don't know if this is helpful, but I've had a similar situation between the City of Dublin for work and then also our regional partners, like the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. And there's an opportunity, I think it's a drop-down menu to toggle between the two teams. I don't know if that's an option for you, but I know that that was helpful for me in the past. But if you have issues, feel free to reach out to Deviani and I, because we can work through it with you.
Okay, yeah, because my company we do behavioral health, so we have all of these HIPAA compliance on my devices. So I think it doesn't allow for the toggle back and forth. So I'll reach out to you.
Please. Yeah.
Please do, yeah.
I was just going to add that you can, if you don't want to post, you can also do reactions to posts, like a thumbs up or a love or something. So as easy and comfortable as you feel.
No, the issue I have is I can't even open it. I can't access anything. So that's why I have it. Yeah, I can't see anything. So I'll reach out to you guys because I'm pretty tech savvy, but I spent a couple hours trying to figure it out and I couldn't.
My apologies, Linda. I meant that at the last comment for just following up when I said earlier for a practice post or just reaction or whatever. But we'll work with you tomorrow on your issue.
And also something to go along with the practice post is we can all look at the 15 points that was given by Dana and really each one of us summarize what we think is the top 3 or 4 within those 15 that we believe is an issue within this city. That can be our first team's test message or whatnot. And let's say I share it with all of you guys. You guys would share what you believe is the top 3 or 4. If somebody agrees with me or you, they'll give a reaction to that post. And what we can end up doing is just really merging all what we said and see if there's an underlining theme. And then that will help us distinct if we need a subcommittee, maybe focusing on one topic, or maybe a subcommittee with a different perspective on a topic. So yeah, but I would recommend that this be done within about a week, just so we can still have momentum and not forget what we're trying to do. And then Dana, how would we go about if, let's say, we do want to vote on increasing the amount of meetings we have? So instead of from once a month to twice a month, what's the process for that?
Well, what would make it really easy is if in this meeting you all could determine that. Be a lot easier than us trying to poll you offline while you've got everybody here. And if you want to have a discussion about that, then I'd recommend you do that here tonight.
Is there anybody who?
It's not about making it easier for us. It's about, do you all want to have a dialogue about that? While you're sitting here together.
Is there anyone who would have issues with meeting twice a month? We can start there.
Yeah, I possibly would not be able to. I have so much that I would not be able to avail like on a regular basis. I'd want to. Yeah, and I guess that's why I was proposing making sure that we're still working, even if we're not like actually meeting, because as Bridget said, these meetings are very limiting. One person only has to talk, and you almost can't think as creatively and freely as you would want to. So I'm trying to figure out ways of the work continuing without having to depend on an actual physical meeting of all, with this Zoom meetings, because I think they're a bit of a limitation as far as getting things done efficiently and quickly as we'd want to.
Again, I think what I would recommend is if you could narrow down to your themes, then we could see if we could support those themes and being additional meetings to that point and then trying to speed it up. The challenge though is if I'm going to have more than a couple people involved in that, it's got to be a committee. That's why I had Jennifer Rader speak to you last month about our open meetings requirements. And as much as I'd like to be able to just say subcommittees go to work and report back, and believe me, I was pushing for that because that's what I wanted you all to be able to do, but it's not meeting the litmus test here legally, so it is a little bit limiting to us. So if you did get down to a group of themes, however you go about that, and as soon as you want to go about that, let me take that back and work the logistics on how we might be able to make that sort of thing happen so that you can work in some smaller groups. If that means that small group needs to have a meeting like this, but with fewer people, I will go try to figure out a way, if I can figure out a way to support that. It's just if I had 15 of them, I couldn't do it. If I had 3 of them, I might be able to support that. And then I think as Bridget made earlier, then we could rotate to another 3 and do it. And I apologize if I'm being repeated.
A question here, because I mean I've kind of identified the 1, 5, 6, 7. What would call that? So my question maybe not clear.
Nancy, you have lost your signal, I believe.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Much better, thank you. Oh, there it went again.
Well, I'll try and pose my question after somebody else can talk now.
Thank you, Nancy. This is Vincent. I resonate with what Dana said, and with so many topics, it's hard to focus. What if we take like a few minutes to look at all the items proposed in the memo? We can cast a vote or something to select at least 2 or 3 items that we can start with. And while we are working on that, we can work through the remaining of the list to find, to assign our priorities. At least get something achieved tonight.
I think we can use different terms, but definitely we've identified something along the line of youth, schools, and education being one theme, I feel like. And I think if you're looking at things like diversity in the workforce, the housing stock, transportation mobility, maybe that's another theme, perhaps something that's more like economics. and infrastructure, economics, housing, transportation, whatever the term might be. I feel like that's maybe another theme that I would identify if it were a test that I had to take right now. And then there's probably a third one. I'm not sure how to phrase it. Perhaps something communication or public relations related. I'm not too convinced of that third one yet.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Dana, you and your team, so that these 15 things that are on this list, can they be placed under perhaps clusters that the city is, initiatives that perhaps the city has that it align, that integrate maybe with the police department and education, and look at perhaps the strategic plan or something that the city has where we could come alongside as a task force and take these 15 and sort of have a macro look at it as we begin our work. I'm not sure if that's a possibility or if it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to think along the same lines of ESAL in terms of consolidating some things and coming up with some themes. And then it is probably, when you stand back and look at it, it's probably pretty amazing how it does align to some things that we may be focused on and working on. So Lynette, I appreciate that. The thing that I didn't want to do, though, as your staff person, is I didn't want to lean into that too far and determine for you what's important for you to want to talk about. I really want this task force to drive that, which is why I kind of keep pushing this in front of you. You tell me what you want, but if you want the staff to go back and take these and massage them a little bit and come back to you for consideration, I'm happy to do that. I just don't want to presuppose or get out in front of you in any way. So, but we're happy to take that assignment on if you'd like us to. And then again, we'll leverage that team site for input. We can monitor that team site for follow-on thoughts, similar to what your chairman, Kofi, suggested, is maybe giving some ideas to that through that team site. So staff, we can take a look at that. We can go and look at these ourselves and bring them back to you. It's however you want to go about it.
I would say I like what Isha, the way he summarized it. I mean, education, 1, and economics, 2, and I think you had said the third one, communication. I thought 3, infrastructure and communication. So that would be able to kind of cover everything in that 15 list. And I propose start with education.
Yeah, align with the Chiefs Advisory Committee's focus as well, starting out with the education. So if there are things to be done together, I think that would allow for that.
Yeah, I agree. I really like the big 3 that ESAL gave out. Once again, I think all of us should really have a deadline of what we think our big 3 or big 4 is, because it's not going to be done tonight. I think Bridget said this, we're not able to really accomplish the real work while in the meeting. It has to be done outside of this meeting. So we need to really take time and develop our big 3, like Esau said. And once we have our big 3, big 4, this will help dictate how we move on forward, if we even need to have meetings twice a month or how to go about it. So it's not something I really want to wait until next meeting for. I think we need to really have this down within 2 weeks, I would say.
Thinking about the nitty gritty of getting this done, I haven't used Teams much, but I'm wondering if there's a way for us to basically create at least 3 different documents, under these 3 different themes. We populate it with these initial items from this list, and then we all make a commitment to go to those 3 separate documents with the 3 separate themes and just do your own, contribute in any way you want. You can add statistics. You can put a dream in there. You can, just add whatever seems to make sense based on your experience and what you think we could do together. And so I think it would be sort of a mix match of hopefully a lot of ideas in the 3 different documents, and then we can sort of cull those down into some priorities that we'll focus on in the next few months. The only other thing I'm wondering is if we want a 4th document. If this is the right approach, I'd suggest one more document that might be other, just again, for the purpose of engagement, not losing people's interest in any great ideas or experiences that would be brought to the table in the other document. If it did not fit under the other 3 topics, we'd invite all of us to add to that as well. And perhaps that'll help us prepare for the next round of topics if we get to those, because the first 3 may be big enough that we'll be busier than just a few months on those. That's just an idea. I don't know if Teams works that way. Deviana?
Yeah, I mean, in the files tab of Teams, we can save a document and separate pages or 3 different documents that everyone has access to. So, and I will send a notification and email to everyone so we can go in there and then start editing that document.
Just so you all don't think I'm too backwards, if if we had been able to meet in person, I would have had we have a great team of black belts and facilitators that we would have brought in and facilitated through this very process. And we could have knocked it out in a couple of hours. We did try that online with our own council just a couple of weeks ago, and it was pretty clunky and awkward and a little bit hard to get through, even with some very well-trained black belts and facilitators. So, I just feel bad that I just can't get y'all in the room to do that right now. And so, but I think this sort of thing that you're talking about, and just people imagining and using creativity and providing ideas and thoughts under themes, kind of achieves the same thing. It's just a little bit slower pace than maybe what we might be used to otherwise. So don't get too frustrated with us. We'll try to get some kind of framework set up so that we can get that done fairly quick.
If someone's having trouble with Teams, then they can reach out to Dublin staff, JM and Deviani, to get help with. Obviously, we all need to be able to access Teams, I think, so that we're as inclusive as possible. Unless there's an alternative that someone else would recommend that we use, like.
Well, the other thing to say, of all else fails, send an email to us, and we'll post it for you. So, you know what I mean? If all else fails, we'll get the ideas to where they need to be. So,
Yeah, can I ask a question? What are the key features we are looking to leverage using Teams?
I have posted all meeting materials on Teams too, so if you don't have access to email, I think that would be your one-stop shop. We also have tagged our website on there. So again, if you are just on Teams, it should provide you all information necessary for being in the meeting of this task force. And then we can add demographics data that was requested in there too, so everyone has access to all the resources on that website.
So that'll be sort of like attachment. Once you log in, you can see all those files, right?
Correct. Yeah, it is exactly. It also has folder structure in one of the tabs, and we can save all documents under that folder structure. It's very similar to network structure.
That's good. I was kind of thinking if people have difficulty accessing Teams, like maybe a backup option would be like we just create some Google folders and share among ourselves. People can access the folders. Probably it's not as interactive as Teams though.
Yeah, and I'd also add with Teams, it's great that you could, from the beginning of when the team was created, you could see a whole trail of information, dialogue, interactions from day one and going on until the team is finished or what have you. But the point is, it's a great kind of receipt of all of the information, all of the dialogue, all of the interactions for the entire history of the teams. So I think there's value there. If you wanted to go back, or if you wanted to add more task members, they can go back and see the complete history of this team. So I think there's value there.
Correct. And then folder structure is very similar to Google folders too. So once you are in there, you will be, I mean, it takes a few minutes to familiarize yourself. It's very similar to Google structure.
Sounds good.
I would like to add, I think the idea that Bridget brought up with the folders and adding resources to specific topics is a really good one. And if possible, I think we should really move with the big three that ESAL gave us of education, economics / infrastructure, and communication, and just at the moment add what resources we want to add. But if we want to change that later on, we can still do that. But I believe those big three that ESAL gave is really, and it's all encompassing on everything we've been really talking about. So yeah, if anyone disagrees, I would like to hear.
I can tell you that what I say at home with my family never is taken this smoothly. So it's amazing.
That's funny. Now I forgot what I was going to say. When we're on Teams, can everybody make a commitment not only to add what you'd like, and again, it's fine if it's not a fully formed idea, but if it is, or if you have references or a link or something you can add, please do. And then in addition to adding your interests or what you think would be important, can we all agree to look at everyone else's lists and sort of read through it so that we'll be in a position to have a sense of what we'd like to prioritize by the next time we meet? Or maybe in the posting process in Teams, we can sort of, if there's a deadline for posting ideas, then maybe there's a second round of we go in and look at all of them and try to weigh in on what we think are the top priorities.
I think that's a good point. I'm still thinking about it, but I wanted to comment because it's one thing for us to just put resources and type what we think in each individual folder, but it doesn't really mean anything if we're not reading each other's comments or watching each other's videos. So I'm still thinking about it, but it would be nice if we had like maybe at the middle point of each month, look through each folder and just check or make a comment on what somebody has posted, or just to give it a reaction, a thumbs up, something like that, because it's not helpful just for us to post something and not have any other interaction amongst ourselves about what we post.
Was there, and I hate to bring this up, but was there some kind of a limitation that was put on us as far as a discussion taking place on Teams? I felt like there was.
Yeah, you have to be careful that it doesn't turn into a committee meeting or a task force meeting offline. So by posting comments or thoughts, videos, articles, things like that for others to take in and read and understand. And I like the idea of having those under themes or in folders so that at least they're categorized. Then when you bring that back to this setting, you can have a dialogue around what all that meant, and then try to set direction as a task force going forward. So teams really should be looked at as that site should be looked at more as a repository of information that people are providing. It could include comments, but if you start having dialogue, I think is where Jennifer was headed with that. That's where it kind of crosses the line on public meetings, and that's where I think we could get into a little bit of trouble. But I think, again, treating it as a repository, getting your thoughts out, your ideas out, posting your comments. I think you could comment on what someone says as long as it doesn't turn into a dialogue that goes towards a decision. And that's a tough line to tread, thin line to tread, but it just takes a little bit of discipline and practice. And I would rather make a mistake crossing that line and then we'll self-correct than to not be creative and not be thinking and not be trying to advance. So I like the idea of trying it and see where it takes us, and we'll watch it. And if it starts to cross any lines, we'll let everybody know, and we'll correct and bring it into the next meeting. But I love that you're all trying to find a creative way to work with this, and I applaud you for that. And if it keeps advancing what we're trying to get done here and speeds things up, then I think we need to try it.
Just thinking ahead a bit, given the reasons not to set up official subcommittees, would it be fair to presume that if we do come up with, say, 2 to 5 priorities under our 3 topics, we could then assign 2 to 3 people based on interests to each topic, and those individual 2 to 3 groups would not necessarily equal a subcommittee, even though they might have their own virtual meeting or get on a phone call together to talk about it so that they could bring something to the larger group. Is that a balance act that sounds appropriate?
It's just another fine line that we've got to make sure whoever's doing that understands. And I think what Jennifer was saying is if you had a dialogue going on between a couple people on the task force, if it's officially assigned as a subcommittee or if it's identified as that, that's where we get into trouble. If you're just dialoguing with each other outside of the meeting, because you have a shared interest, it's just when everyone starts piling in on the same thread and it starts looking like a meeting, then it is a meeting. And that's what we have to be careful with. And I know that's vague, nebulous, and hard to define, but that's what Jennifer was trying to caution us about. What I would like to do, and I think in the fact that you're looking at 3 general themes, I do want to toy with the idea of having some subcommittees, but I just got to work on the logistics of that. And if we could make them subcommittees and do subcommittee work, I'm going to be supportive of that. It's just I got to figure out the logistics of how we make that. So I'm committing to you that I will go work that in between meetings here, because I think that's the best way it's going to advance us really. Is to get into at least 2 or 3 formal subcommittees. And I'm going to try to see if I can figure out a way to make that happen. So I may fail, but I'm going to give it a try.
So basically, just going back a little bit as Dana looks to see about the subcommittees, because it's sounding like that might be the most efficient way to kind of do this. But basically, as long as it's not a planned, like Bridget, we don't say, hey, at 3 o'clock we're gonna meet to talk about this. Then that becomes like a planned meeting that's not warranted or that needs to be notified. But if I just called her and we just were talking, then we could do that, as long as we did not like premeditate or pre-plan for a meeting like that. So we could still carry on like that. But most of all, I think the team meetings will be the best way to be able to make those discussions. but it sounds like, because if I look at myself, if I keep thinking, wait, am I crossing the line? And then it hinders you from even sharing. So maybe that's why I'm thinking the subcommittees might be the best way, so that you know that you're not walking a fine line while trying to give an idea or propose something.
Yeah, and I know the effectiveness of subcommittees. I've been on boards myself outside of the city where that works, but those aren't necessarily public agencies. I've used them in this setting, but it's just more formal, and it's just the logistics of it and keeping minutes and all those things that have to happen, and so it's that. So again, I'm going to work the notion of at least maybe 3 subcommittees and see what that looks like. I may or may not be able to support that, so I'm not going to commit completely, but I'm going to look into it. Having a good discussion with a fellow task force member is not frowned upon, nor is it not allowed. If you're allowed to call up somebody and say, hey, I want to get to know you better, and what do you think about that topic? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, even on a team site, when we start having a dialogue that looks a lot like a public meeting, that's where we get into a little bit of trouble.
So we treat Teams as more like a Pinterest, right? Just post it and show off what you're thinking about or what you have at your house, and everybody else just gets to look at it but don't get to comment on it.
I think that's probably a fair assessment, yeah. Comparison.
Did anybody else, it sounds like Nancy was thinking about it. I sort of want everyone's phone number. I don't know if I should just reach out to everybody individually and ask for their phone number, or if that's something people are comfortable sharing, or how that works with public records and privacy issues.
We have everyone's number, so let me check on that, the ability to share it. The one thing I'm particularly sensitive to with our youth is that on here is I've told their parents that whatever the youth member gets, the parents get. So there's just that, so to make sure the parents understand who's engaging and what's being said and that sort of thing. So as far as other adult members, then sure, you can. So let me check on that. I don't think there's any problem sharing information.
Yeah, I think just having phone numbers would help. I agree with you, Bridget.
And so to summarize what we said the past 20 minutes or so, if I miss any key points, please let me know. We've came up with 3 big ideas so far that we're moving along with: education, finance, finance/infrastructure, and then communication. What we want to do is be able to go in each folder under Microsoft Teams, post resources for us to really dive into the issues. And then some point during the week, we highly recommend each person to go in and just look at what everybody said. And after we have really looked at what we've collected, it will determine how we want to move about subcommittees and whether or not to increase or decrease meetings. Did I miss anything? That was the key part.
Kofi, the only thing I would add was you mentioned listing resources under the 3 topics. I think we also want even if you don't have a resource, we just want your suggestion or what you'd like to see in Dublin under that topic. I think that would be my only addition, and I think that's correct unless somebody else has a different point of view.
Dana, if no one else has anything to add, are we able to slide down the agenda?
Yeah, we can do that. I think that was a good summary. Kofi, I appreciate that. And we'll have everyone move out that direction. So Yeah, by all means. And I think that the next item is new business or discussion.
I'll just put a plug in. I did join Teams as a guest, and I put in there just a little link to a housing lecture by an author who wrote The Color of Law on Friday, I think at 11 a.m. It's just a webinar. So if you have any interest in really learning why there's such strong segregation in most suburbs, Richard Rothstein, I think, is the author, just wrote an amazing book a while back, and he is the speaker at this webinar. It's a link and it's already in Teams.
I feel a lot of the new business topics was talked about in the previous section of the agenda. Does anybody else have anything to add, comments or concerns? All right, Dana, can we slide down?
Sure.
Next
Yeah,
steps.
if you want to. Yeah, I put next steps in case there was anything else you wanted to talk about that the task force wanted to seek out. I think really though, I think you did a good job as the previous discussion and really identifying some of those next steps. But if there are other items out there that you would like us to help you with, or that you want to do as a task force, that's why I thought you could bring that up under this item. And then the next two items really had to do with meetings. So, our next meeting is December the 15th. And that we posed that question about wanting to meet more often again. And then there are some proposed meeting dates on here. I went ahead and had Candy just propose these as sort of a rhythm or a rhythm to the meeting. So I think this shook out to be like the third Tuesday of the month from 6 to 8, unless you wanted to meet more routinely, so that we had some cadence to the meetings so that people could plan accordingly. But that's however you want to do it. You don't necessarily have to lay everything out that far in advance. If that's helpful to you, great. If not, I take it month by month. That's something we can do as well.
We'll definitely have an idea of how often, if we want to stay the same or increase meeting times by next meeting for sure. With that being said, Dana, how do I do the adjournment?
Yeah, just ask for a motion to adjourn and a second, and then vote on the adjournment.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Anyone second that?
Second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Those not in favor, say no. All right. Thank you all for tuning in today. Have a wonderful week.
Great job, Mr. Chair. Thank you all.
Good job,
Thank
folks.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Dana.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.